The article was headlined, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, are you ready to create history in Judea and Samaria? President Trump and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are preparing to create history together on July the 1st, when Israel restores Jewish sovereignty after 3,000 years. 3,000 years on 30% of Judea and Samaria, the Jewish people's biblical and ancient heartland. About 65,000 Arabs, 5% of the Arab population of Judea and Samaria, and 450,000 Jews live in the area proposed for Jewish sovereignty in about a month and a half. The road forward has been made possible after Netanyahu was unanimously confirmed as Israel's next prime minister by 11 judges of the Israeli Supreme Court. Now, there were people appealing to the court, attempting to get the court to rule that Netanyahu was not able to form a government. But the court didn't do that. Instead, they ruled unanimously that he could form a government. Netanyahu's new government is being sworn in on Thursday, May 14th, 2020. To give you some background, the San Remo Resolution and the Treaty of Sevres in 1920 created the British Mandate and adopted the Balfour Declaration. In case you're not familiar with the Balfour Declaration, it was passed by the Cabinet of Great Britain in 1917. Jewish people had been appealing to Great Britain since Great Britain had just captured the area of Israel's homeland. The Jews were going before Great Britain saying, please, would you, now that you're in possession of what they presently call Palestine, but the real name for it was Israel, would you please declare the rebirth of the nation of Israel? Would you set aside this territory for an Israeli state? We haven't had a home for almost 2,000 years. Would you do it now? So the Cabinet passed a resolution called the Balfour Declaration saying His Majesty's government looks with favor on the creation of a homeland for the Jewish people in the area now called Palestine. The League of Nations then voted to officially adopt the British Mandate for Palestine in 1922, and they included in that vote the Balfour Declaration. Now, that was 100 years ago. All this was happening. It's now coming full circle 100 years later, and Netanyahu and Trump are prepared to implement more of that Balfour Declaration that was passed by Britain 100 years ago. Now, let's look at the question. Is this going to be an annexation or a restoration? The article said, restoring Jewish sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, designated for reconstitution of the Jewish national home by the international community 100 years ago, is not a West Bank annexation. An article that explains all this will follow in just a moment, but let me just say to you that the Palestinians did not control the area of Judea, Samaria, since forever. What happened was, when Israel was declared a nation by the United Nations, at that time, the Arabs, 5 Arab nations, came against Israel to try to destroy the newborn nation before it could even catch its breath. Jordan was one of the main powers that came across the Jordan River into Israel. When the ceasefire was declared in 1949, Jordan did not leave, but instead they occupied the area called the West Bank or Judea, Samaria. So Jordan was in illegal occupation. Jordan attempted to annex the territory, but the United Nations says, oh no, you can't do that. That would be illegal. So Jordan was under illegal occupation. The West Bank was occupied illegally by Jordan from 1948 to 1967. Well, the next thing we know, Israel's going to come in possession. Did they take it from the Palestinians? No, they took it from Jordan. As soon as you say end time, they say, whoa, the end of the world. When's it going to be? And you can see this mask of fear. I'm not telling you the end time is coming. I'm telling you, you live in it right now. Daniel chapter number 7, verse number 4. The first beast was like a lion. We have the eagle used continually to depict the United States of America. You see it on governmental documents. We are the generation for which these that you will not miss one segment of understanding end time, because I've had many people tell me it's changed their life forever. Many of the major prophecies of the Bible are given to us 2, 3, some of them as high as 4 or 5 times. There is not any chance it's not going to happen, because it's in your Bible, it's prophesied, and the prophecies always coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, the news from Israel is absolutely boiling. One article after another after another. One article from the Israeli viewpoint, another article from the Palestinian viewpoint. Now, this particular article that I want to read a little bit from is entitled, Israel Celebrates Palestinians' Rage at Pompeo's Sovereignty Statements. This was published May the 13th in the Israel National News. Israel's economic minister, Eli Cohen, said, "We now have a historic opportunity to promote the issue of adopting 30% of the West Bank, the area of Judea and Samaria. We have the wonderful opportunity to promote this issue with the backing of the most supportive administration we've ever had in the White House, thanks to President Trump's deal of the century. We have to take advantage of this opportunity immediately and apply sovereignty over the West Bank area, the 30% that's been designated, as soon as possible. This historic event will be historic justice for the regions of the homeland that were liberated in the Six-Day War." Now, don't forget the difference between annexation and restoration. As you can see here in Israel National News, they do not say we are annexing it. We are saying we liberated this territory from Jordanian occupation in the 1967 Six-Day War. The article continues. Not surprisingly, the Palestinian Authority is warning that annexation of Judea and Samaria will herald a disaster for the Palestinians and cause a Nakba, which means catastrophe, similar to what took place in 1948. Now, ever since 1948, with the rebirth of the nation of Israel on May the 14th of 1948, the Arabs call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. Well, that was because it was the rebirth of the nation of Israel after 2,000 years. So now they're saying, we're getting ready to have another Nakba. The article goes on to say a senior member of the Palestinian Authority leadership in Ramallah told Israel Hayom, that's the name of the newspaper that was doing the interview. Israel Hayom, the word Hayom means today. They have, here in the United States, we have USA Today newspaper. Well, there they have Israel Today newspaper. It's called Israel Hayom. So they told Israel Hayom, annexing the Jordan Valley and parts of the West Bank to Israel will be nothing less than another Nakba for the Palestinian people. The Trump administration is supporting and encouraging the ongoing Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. Now let's pause right there. These are not Palestinian territories. That's all propaganda. When Israel occupied this from Jordan in 1967, there was no such thing as Palestinians. That was only a creation by Yasser Arafat around that same time. So this occupation of the Palestinian territories and the legitimatizing of the Zionist occupation's crimes against the Palestinians. We will appeal to the UN and international organizations to stop this, the official said. He's referring not only to the UN, but also to the International Criminal Court. The Palestinian leadership also expressed deep disappointment in Arab countries and criticized the stances of Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the Gulf Arab Emirates on the matter of Israeli annexation. We are furious and heavily disappointed in the Arab rulers who have done nothing less than betray us, senior officials said. All right, let's pause just a moment. Because President Trump, when he launched his peace plan 1 week after his inauguration, sent his son-in-law Jared Kushner and his long-term personal lawyer Jason Greenblatt to the Middle East. And they went to Jordan, to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, to the United Arab Emirates. And they talked to them. Look, we want to solve this problem. We want to work out a plan that will be fair for everyone. They have sold these countries on this plan. And that's the reason the Palestinians are saying they're selling us out. Now, the declarations, here's what the Palestinians said. The declarations being made by Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as other Arab countries, against the plan to annex the Jordan Valley and large parts of the West Bank are just lip service, they said. The European Union is also perturbed at the prospect of Israel annexing the Jordan Valley, Judea, and Samaria. This week, France said it would push for a tough EU, that's European Union, response to any such action by Israel. Ahead of the visit, now here we go into another article. I'm telling you, these articles are coming at us fast and furious. Ahead of visit, Pompeo says sovereignty is, in the end, an Israeli decision. In an exclusive interview with Israel Hayam days before the visit to Jerusalem, U.S. senior diplomat Pompeo says he plans to discuss implementation of the Trump administration's vision for peace. This comes from Israel Hayam, May the 12th, and the article was written by Ariel Kahana. So here are just a few excerpts from this interview, this exclusive interview with Pompeo. Is there a specific reason for your visit? Now, you should notice that he is going nowhere else. He's flying all the way to Israel, staying 6 hours, that's it, and leaving. So what's the burning issue here? They asked him that question, and here was Pompeo's reply. I want to bring them, Netanyahu and Gantz. Of course, Netanyahu's the prime minister. Gantz is the deputy prime minister. I want to bring them up to speed on the progress we think we are making on President Trump's vision for peace. Now, what are we talking about here? The progress that we're making. There was a committee appointed of Israelis and U.S. citizens to map out the Palestinian state as President Trump envisions it. Now, it was drawn roughly when Trump issued the deal of the century. But they said, if we're going to implement this by July the 1st, we have to have this officially done by professional surveyors. So now then, Pompeo is in Israel, and by the way, while I'm making this broadcast, he's there right now. It is a pretty detailed and realistic and implementable concept. And I wanted to share with them some of the work that we are continuing to do on that. He's undoubtedly not only referring to the map, but he's also continuing to talk to Jordan, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and other nations. You mentioned the vision for peace. The main issue of the new government is the extension of sovereignty over areas of Judea and Samaria. How do you see this historic step? Keep having that word historic come in because it is truly that. After 3,000 years that some of this territory has not been under Israeli control, now this part of the promised land is all coming back within the next month or two. No wonder we say it's historic. Pompeo answered, we will certainly have conversations with them on their plans, how they are thinking about that. This is one of the topics we will certainly discuss. Questioner, there was a report here in Israel that you are going to ask the Prime Minister and Gantz to delay this move. Pompeo, I have said previously that this is a decision that the Israelis will make. I want to understand how the new leadership, the soon-to-be new government, is thinking about that. Now, as Pompeo has given this interview, the swearing in of the new government is 2 days away. Question, from your point of view, is there still a green light to do it as was agreed in January? Again, I'm going to hear how they are thinking about it. This is, in the end, an Israeli decision. We will certainly share our judgments as to how we can best execute the vision for peace that the Prime Minister agreed with, and we will have a good, detailed conversation about that. When I'm going through all this, my hair is almost standing on end because God promised Abraham 4,000 years ago that the territory that we're discussing right now belongs to Israel forever. Well, they've got part of it back in 1948, and they got more of it back in 67. Now then, they're getting ready to get even more of it back in 2020. Next question, about the sovereignty move. There are objections among some of the Arab states in the region, like Jordan and the Gulf states. Is that an issue you are dealing with? Are you trying to calm them down? We have been in contact, this is Pompeo replying, we have been in contact with all these countries. They are good friends and partners. We took account of their concerns in the vision for peace. Same thing as the deal of the century. You can see in the document how all of these various elements would come into play. We have created now a plan that leads to a better life for the Palestinian people. And that's important to those Arab countries as well. We will continue to be in conversation with them. We hope that we can convince the Palestinian leadership that they should engage with the Israelis on the basis of the vision for peace. Did you notice what Mr. Pompeo had to say? We think this deal that we have constructed will be good for the Palestinians and good for the Israelis. President Trump likes to say that over and over again. So far, the Palestinians have not yet been convinced. Next question. Some are saying in Europe that the document would prevent peace. What's your view? Pompeo. This document is different than what has been said before. It is realistic. The previous efforts were not very detailed. They were impossible to implement. Now he's referring back to the Obama-Kerry negotiations in 2014. He's referring back to the negotiations under Ehud Olmert, back to the negotiations under George W. Bush, and way on back. Pompeo is saying those previous negotiations and plans were impossible to implement because they were very broad and not detailed. He went on to say, we think this plan meets the core requirements of both the Palestinians and the Israeli people. By the way, if you'd like to read the plan, you can go to whitehouse.gov. It's 181 pages, and yes, it's very detailed. Next question. I interviewed U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, last week, and he said that Israel could indeed apply sovereignty on Judea and Samaria communities in a few weeks. Pompeo's reply, we have clarified what we believe international law permits, and we recognize Israel's right to make its own decisions. We have seen this before. We have seen when they have made a decision on a particular piece of land where Israeli courts have said, no, this does not comport with Israeli law. And again, this would be Israel's decision to make. We will certainly share with them our views on the best way, in our judgment, to proceed consistent with what we have laid out in our vision for peace. So what are the Muslim leaders saying? Now, when you talk about Mahmoud Abbas, he has so far been dead set against it. I don't even want to read the plan. But other Muslim leaders don't agree. This article is entitled, Muslim Leaders Tell Samaria Council Head. Many of us pray for Israeli sovereignty. This comes from Israel National News on May the 12th. Arab and Muslim leaders yesterday arrived at the offices of the Samaria Regional Council to celebrate Iftar and the Lag Ba'omer together with Council Head Yossi Dagan. Among those in attendance were Sheikh Abu Khalil Tamimi of Ramallah, Mohammed Masad of Jenin, Sarah Zoabi, as well as other leaders who preferred to hide their identities for fear of their lives. Dagan and the Muslims discussed the deal of the century's impact on the region, eradicating terror and incitement to violence, and discussed with them ways to maintain peace and economic and social cooperation. Terror is the result of Palestinian Authority incitement, Dagan said. We work with local leaders and sheikhs who oppose the Palestinian Authority and oppose the path of terror. We have disagreements, and there are many things where we see eye to eye. First and foremost, it's important to have shared dialogue with those who are ready and willing to consider partnering. There's an alternative to the murderous Palestinian Authority. Leaders who are interested in quiet and in coexistence, and they are sitting here with us. The Trump program largely relies in our industrial areas, and these are our natural partners for co-living here. The Arab representatives finished up with this word. He said, many of us Arabs are praying right now for the success of President Trump's deal of the century. Now that's amazing.